Howdy, I'm Devon Noel Lee with Family History Fanatics with the host of my favorite podcast, ExtremeGenes Family History Radio. This is Scott Fisher, and you're the Radio Roots Sleuth, aren't you?
I am the Radio Roots Sleuth.
How did you come up with that?
Well, it all kind of sounds the same, right? It's memorable.
It is memorable.
I'm on the radio.
Yes.
And I am a Roots Sleuth.
Yes. And then it just a brainstorm at 4 a.m. You came up with
Pretty
it?
much, yeah.
Pretty much. Okay, so the podcast started in 2013 in July.
Yes.
That's what I read.
Right.
How did you come up with it? I'm assuming you were in radio before, but correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I've been in radio since I was a teenager.
Yeah, I can't imagine why. He's got that voice.
Well, yeah, I started in my hometown in Connecticut, and I was a morning show host for many years, playing music and doing fun and games and prank phone calls. And
so you were on the Pop Channel.
Oh, yeah. I was a top morning show host for many, many years.
There you go.
And it just reached the point I was in my life that I said, you know what? My last morning show ended with a format change, and I said, I don't want to get up at 4:30 in the morning anymore.
Yeah.
I'm done with it.
Yeah.
And my wife said, well, go do that thing you've been talking about doing, that talk show on family history.
Oh, so you've been percolating for a while.
I had been percolating on this thing for a while, that it was something that I would get to eventually, and that seemed to be the moment, and in 2013. So I was fortunate that within the company I'd been working with, I was still doing some part-time work there, that I went and talked to the talk show station manager, and I said, let me take you to lunch. I want to run something by you. So we talked about it, and he lit up, and he loved the idea.
Oh, wonderful.
And he was very supportive, and so he got me a time slot within a couple of weeks.
And this was where? What location?
In Salt Lake City, Utah.
Okay, so that makes sense. I'm in Connecticut. I don't know if that would work.
Yeah, well, right. And so it was a great start-off point. So it allowed me several months to start to refine what it was going to sound like, how we were going to put this thing together, how it was going to be formatted.
Okay.
And then in January, I was picked up for national syndication by Talk Shows USA, which is based out of Colorado.
Okay.
And they handle a lot of the major weekend talk shows, like The Money Pit, Gun Talk, which is about gun collectors.
Okay.
And many others.
Okay.
And but they can only handle so many because, how many shows can you pitch? So they're very, very limited. So I was very, very lucky to get that.
Absolutely.
And within 2 days of us going online with them, we wound up with 4 stations in Alabama. And they liked the show so much, within a short time, we wound up having that show aired twice in those markets.
Okay.
So at this point now, we're on 48 radio stations around the country. We're on in Phoenix. They air it twice.
Okay.
And we're on in Las Vegas. We're on in Fitchburg, Massachusetts. We're on in Florida, Mississippi, Tennessee, Maui, Hawaii.
Maui, Hawaii.
Yes.
Oh, my goodness.
And which means that I have to go to Hawaii every year to make sure they're running it right.
Yeah.
It has to be perfectly
Does the wife
run.
Get to go?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, she's my technical advisor.
Yes,
so
definitely.
Make sure that's taken care, just in case the IRS is, following this. So, anyway.
Well, your wife.
So that's how the whole thing started.
Absolutely. So you've been doing this a long time, and you can listen to it on Stitcher and iTunes.
Right, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, and ExtremeGenes.com.
Yep.
The podcast is at this moment at 50,000 downloads a month.
I'm one of them.
And but it's growing so fast. By the time you play it, I don't know where we're going to be at.
Exactly. So, how has the format changed since those early days? Has it been the same, or have you just evolved it?
Well, there's been a little bit of evolution in it. Initially, I did the opening segment with the family histoire news.
Right.
It's basically genealogy in the news, things that relate to history or stories relating to people's discoveries. And then David Allen Lambert, who is the chief genealogist for the New England Historic Genealogical Society and AmericanAncestors.org, agreed to come on and co-host that segment with me because he's got a lot of insight, and so we opened the show with that.
And he's always saying, hello from Beantown.
Beantown, Boston, Massachusetts. And then Tom Perry does the segment at the end dealing with preservation, and he's been on every segment since the beginning. So all right now, as of right now, 178 episodes.
That's right.
So he's been terrific, and
so informative.
He's very informed, very knowledgeable. He's my favorite nerd.
Gotta have nerds.
Gotta have those nerds. And then in between, we always have listeners with great stories and how they found them, so we can learn from them. And experts on different, from DNA to how to research somebody in Sweden or whatever. And we look for a balance. It's really important that there are stories in there, because I don't want this to be like a library lesson,
Yeah, well, I'm not going to listen to that one.
Today we're going to talk about Italy. Okay. No, there's energy, there's entertainment, there's information, and I think a lot of inspiration, I hope.
Nice. So, my favorite, it's hilarious. I believe it's 133. I'll correct it in the show notes if I'm wrong, but it's Elmer McCurdy and his 65-year
his journey.
His journey. How did you ever come across that story? If you don't know, Elmer McCurdy was not buried for 65 years. I'll link to that podcast in the show notes. You have to listen to it. It's hilarious.
It's pretty amazing. The guy died and nobody was there to claim the body, and so it started out with the funeral home putting him on display for a fee so that it would cover their costs. And then somebody claiming to be a relative saw that they were making money from this, came in and claimed the body, and they took him on display over many, many years. And basically for decades, he was running around until people thought he was a wax figure.
Because he was in a haunted house, right?
Yeah, he was in a haunted house. They thought they didn't know it was the real deal. And it's a long story. You'll want to hear the guy talk about it, our guest who knew the whole tale behind it. It was unbelievable.
You didn't go looking for that story. How did you find out about this story?
We do a lot of research.
Okay.
I'm obviously to do the opening segments with what's happening in the news, and we share that on ExtremeGenes.com, links to those things.
Right.
We run across a lot of stuff. Well, I look for guests, especially in the beginning. I didn't really realize there was such a large genealogy community out there, and
more nerds, right?
Yeah, right. And so when I started the show, it's like, great, I know how to do radio, but I don't know a lot of folks who should be guests on this show. I knew a few people, and then they'd link me with a few more.
Okay.
And within a year, I was very well integrated in with the community, and now it's really quite easy to find good guests and line them up. And people within the industry pretty much know what I'm looking for now, and how the show sounds and how it works, and what might make a good segment.
Awesome.
And so we're always focused on giving you something of quality and that's fun and interesting and informative. Okay,
so here's my question I've been meaning to ask you. So I listened to ExtremeGenes, and some of the stories are pretty extreme, like Elmer McCurdy.
Yes. A few of them. They're not all like that.
Not all. But sometimes, what would you say to somebody who says, my stories really aren't that interesting. My dad was an accountant. My grandma was a stay-at-home mom. My grandpa was a baker. What do you tell somebody so that they're not discouraged and they could just laugh a little?
Well, that's the point. I mean, my great-grandfather was not married to my great-grandmother because she was married to somebody else at the time. Oh. And then he went off and had a fling with a gal in her 20s when he was in about 60.
Oh,
had a child.
Grandpa.
Yeah, go Grandpa. I mean, we all have fascinating stories, and you don't hide from those things. They're interesting and they're entertaining at the same time. You laughed. Has nothing to do with me. But
should we be laughing though?
Well, what should we be doing? The stories of the so-called ordinary, they're not ordinary because these are people who loved you and had an effect on you, or loved your mother, or loved your father, or loved your grandfather, and they turned them into the people that they are, who helped turn them into who you are. And maybe the baker had the #1 bakery in a little town in Illinois, and everybody knew who he was, and everybody has a story that's worthy of writing down. We all have ordinary people. We all have extraordinary people. We all have scandals, like the one I was just talking about. Yeah. We all descend from kings, and we all descend from paupers.
And the chambermaids.
And sometimes both at the same time.
Yeah.
So
Well, Scott, it is such a pleasure. I enjoyed listening to you.
Thank you.
And if you need to listen to him, check out the show links at the bottom of this podcast. Not podcast. He has a podcast. I have a YouTube channel.
Right.
And listen to Scott. He is fantastic.
ExtremeGenes.com.
There you go.